The word savings used to feel so solid, so concrete. It was a number in a bank account, yes, but it was more than that. It was a fortress. It was the physical manifestation of years of discipline, of skipped vacations, of driving the same car for a decade, of my wife brewing coffee at home instead of buying it. It was our past and our future, all rolled into one neat, tidy sum. It was the down payment on the forever home we dreamed of. It was college for our daughter. It was a comfortable retirement. It was security. I should know. I was in the business of security. As an insurance agent, I spent my days selling people protection against the unpredictable. My job was to look a client in the eye and promise them that if the worst happened, this number, this policy, would be there to catch them. And I was good at it because I believed in it. I believed in the fundamental stability of the industry, in the mathematical certainty of risk pools and actuarial tables. So when I decided to start my own agency, it didn't feel like a gamble to me. It felt like the ultimate investment in our own security. I saw it so clearly. A small, independent agency built on handshakes and trust, not on call centers and algorithms. A place where I could build real relationships, where I could be a pillar of the community. I was tired of working for the big corporations, of being a nameless drone. I wanted to build something with my name on it, a legacy for my family. My wife, bless her heart, was swept up in my vision. I painted a picture for her, a future where I was my own boss, where the profits from my hard work would come directly to us, not to some faceless shareholders 1,000 miles away. I made spreadsheets. I showed her projections. I was persuasive and passionate, and my confidence was infectious. The biggest hurdle was the startup capital. I needed a significant sum for licensing, for office space, for marketing, for everything. The business loan I was approved for wasn't enough. There was a gap. And there, sitting in our joint account, was the solution, our life savings. I remember the night I proposed it. We were at the kitchen table, the same table where we paid our bills and helped our daughter with her homework. "This is our chance," I told her, my hands covering hers. "It's scary, I know, but if we don't bet on ourselves, who will? This isn't just spending the money, it's moving it. It's investing it in the best asset I know, me, in us." She was hesitant. I could see the fear in her eyes, the lifetime of cautious habit warring with the dream I was selling. That money was her safety, her comfort. But in the end, she agreed. She believed in me. The day I transferred our entire savings, every last dollar, into the new business checking account was the most terrifying and exhilarating moment of my life. The number in our personal account dropped to almost zero. It was a breathtaking sight, but I wasn't scared. I was electrified. I had put all my chips on the table. There was no turning back. The first year was a testament to that energy. I worked relentlessly, fueled by the knowledge that everything was on the line. I was the first one to the office and the last one to leave. I networked, I cold called, I went to every community event. I built a business from scratch, policy by policy, and it started to work. We were signing clients, we were generating revenue, the business was growing. I'd come home late, exhausted but buzzing, and show my wife the numbers. "See," I'd say, "it's working, we're going to be okay." And for a time, we were more than okay. The business was thriving. We were paying ourselves a decent salary. The void in our savings account was still there, a constant reminder of the risk we'd taken, but it felt like a distant memory, a necessary sacrifice on the road to success. I was so proud. I had built it. My name was on the sign. My dream was real. I had looked into the face of financial risk, and I had won. I was so confident, so sure of myself. I was a man who had mastered the art of security. And like so many men blinded by their own success, I failed to see the single greatest risk of all, the slow, insidious creep of a dream turning into a monster. The engine of a small business doesn't run on passion, it runs on cash flow. And my engine started to sputter. It wasn't one big thing, it was 1,000 small things. A new, aggressive competitor opened up down the street, undercutting my prices. A couple of large commercial clients, the bedrock of my revenue, didn't renew their policies. A string of legitimate but costly claims hit all at once, impacting my loss ratio and making my underwriters nervous. The steady, predictable flow of income started to become erratic. Some months were good, others were terrifyingly lean. The business started to need money. It began innocently enough. I skipped my own paycheck one month to make sure my 2 employees got theirs. "It's a temporary cash flow issue," I told my wife, framing it as a prudent, responsible decision. She accepted it, though the worry lines around her eyes deepened. But temporary became the new normal. The business was like a thirsty beast, and its thirst was unquenchable. The next step was the business credit card. I started using it for small operational expenses, office supplies, a software subscription. Then it became bigger things, a marketing campaign, the rent. The balance grew, and the high interest rate was like a parasitic vine, strangling my already tight margins. I was so focused on keeping the business alive, on protecting my initial investment, our initial investment, that I stopped thinking rationally. Every decision was driven by a single desperate thought: I can't let this fail. To fail would be to admit that I had taken our life savings, our entire future, and set it on fire. My ego couldn't handle that. My heart couldn't handle the thought of looking my wife in the eye and telling her I had lost it all. So I started a secret war, a battle fought in the trenches of my own bank accounts. The line between my personal finances and the business's finances began to blur, then disappeared entirely. I'd use my personal debit card to pay a vendor, telling myself I'd pay myself back when things picked up. I never did. The loans from me to the business became a one-way street. The fortress, our savings, was gone, but we had other lines of defense, small ones, a modest emergency fund we had slowly started to rebuild, a small inheritance my wife had received from her grandmother that she'd kept in a separate account. One by one, I started to raid them. This was my darkest secret. I would transfer money in the middle of the night, my heart pounding with shame and adrenaline. I felt like a thief in my own home. I would craft elaborate justifications in my head. The business just needs a small injection of capital to land this big new client. This is the last time. Once this check clears, I'll put it all back. They were lies. I knew they were lies, but I clung to them like a life raft. The stress was eating me alive. I was a terrible husband, a ghost of a father. I was at home, but my mind was always at the office, wrestling with the numbers, trying to move money around, trying to rob Peter to pay Paul. My wife knew something was wrong. Financial statements I showed her were carefully curated works of fiction. I'd omit the credit card statements, inflate the revenue projections, but she could see the truth in my face. I was gaunt, exhausted, my eyes darting with a hunted look. "Talk to me," she would plead. "What's going on? I can help." But I couldn't tell her. Admitting the truth felt like speaking a death sentence. As long as I kept it to myself, as long as I kept juggling, I could maintain the illusion that I was still in control. The truth was, I hadn't been in control for a long time. The business was controlling me. The debt was controlling me. The fear was controlling me. I was no longer the confident entrepreneur who had bet on himself. I was a desperate man, alone on a sinking ship, frantically bailing out the water with a thimble, all while telling my family on the shore that the view was beautiful and the sailing was smooth. The emptiness of our savings account was no longer a symbol of our shared risk and ambition. It was the epicenter of my deception, a black hole I had created, and it was beginning to pull the rest of our world into it. Desperation is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs you to reason, to logic, to the long-term consequences of your actions. All that matters is the next minute, the next hour, the next payroll period. My entire existence had narrowed to a single frantic goal: keeping the business alive for one more day. The savings were gone. The emergency funds were gone. The personal credit cards were maxed out. I had run out of other people's money to spend, so I started to leverage our future. I went to the bank, the same bank that held the mortgage on our home, and I applied for a home equity line of credit. A HELOC. The acronym sounded so clean, so professional, but what it really was a second mortgage. It was a way to turn the one solid, real asset we had left, our home, into liquid cash that I could pour into the gaping maw of the business. I did it all without telling my wife. I forged her signature on the application documents. I can still feel the slick, cheap plastic of the pen in my hand, the way my fingers trembled as I tried to replicate the familiar loops and swirls of her name. It was a crime, both legally and morally. It was a betrayal so profound that even now, years later, the memory of it makes me physically ill. But the anesthetic of desperation was working. I told myself it was a strategic business move. I told myself that once the business turned around, I would pay it off immediately, and she would never have to know. I was protecting her from unnecessary worry. That's the lie I repeated to myself over and over, a mantra of self-deception. The day the line of credit was approved, I felt a surge of relief so powerful it almost felt like victory. I had a new war chest. I had bought myself time. I immediately drew down a huge chunk of it and injected it into the business. I paid off the most demanding vendors. I got current on the rent. I even paid myself a salary for the first time in months, a piece of theater designed to reassure my wife that things were getting better. For a few weeks, the illusion held. I was less stressed. I was more present at home. I tried to reconnect with my wife and daughter to play the part of the husband and father who had successfully navigated a rough patch. But the money was a temporary fix, a shot of adrenaline to a dying patient. The underlying problems of the business, the competition, the tight margins, the changing market, hadn't gone away. The beast was still thirsty, and I started to feed it again, this time with the equity of our home. The withdrawals from the HELOC became more and more frequent. I was using it to cover payroll, to pay the minimums on the business credit cards, to fund marketing campaigns that yielded no results. I was chasing my losses, doubling down on a bad bet, convinced that my luck had to turn. I was like a gambler at a poker table, down to his last chip, convinced the next card would be an ace. But the aces never came. The business continued its slow, agonizing death spiral. The stress came roaring back, worse than before, because now the stakes were even higher. I wasn't just losing our savings anymore, I was losing our home. My health started to fail. I had chronic headaches, dizzy spells, a constant, crushing fatigue. I was a ghost, haunting the halls of my own life. The breaking point came in the form of a certified letter from the bank. It was a notice of default on the home equity line of credit. I had been so focused on plugging holes in the business that I had missed a payment. My wife got the mail that day. I came home from another soul-crushing day at the office to find her sitting at the kitchen table. The letter was open in front of her. The look on her face was not one of anger or of sadness. It was a look of complete and utter emptiness. The person she thought she was married to, the man she had trusted with her life and her future, did not exist. He was a fiction I had created. "What is this?" she asked, her voice a dead, flat whisper. There were no more lies to tell. The anesthetic had worn off, and all that was left was the raw, gangrenous wound of my deceit. So I told her everything, the rating of the accounts, the maxed-out credit cards, the second mortgage, the forged signature. I confessed the entire, sordid story of my secret war, a war in which I had sacrificed her, our daughter, and our home in a pathetic attempt to save my own pride. She listened in silence, her face a pale, unreadable mask. When I finished, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood up, picked up the letter, and tore it into small, neat pieces. "The business didn't fail," she said, her voice shaking with a quiet, controlled rage. "You did." That night, she packed a bag for herself and our daughter. There was no discussion, no negotiation. I had detonated a bomb in the middle of our lives, and she was evacuating the blast zone. As I stood on the porch and watched her drive away, I finally understood. The business was already dead. It had been for a long time. I just hadn't been willing to sign the death certificate. Now my marriage was dead too, and I was the one who had killed it. The collapse was total and swift. Without my wife's presence, without the comforting, everyday fiction of a family life to go home to, I had no reason to keep up the pretense. The fight was gone. I let the beast starve. I stopped feeding it money I didn't have. I stopped showing up at the office. I just sat in the echoing silence of my half-empty house and waited for the end. The calls from creditors started first, then the legal notices. The bank began foreclosure proceedings on the house. The business, unattended, withered and died in a matter of weeks. The final act was the bankruptcy filing, a public and humiliating admission of my complete and utter failure. I had to list every debt, every asset. Process strips you bare, forcing you to confront the catastrophic mathematics of your ruin. The numbers on the page were staggering, a monument to my arrogance and my folly. I had started with a fortress of savings and ended with a crater of debt so deep I knew I would spend the rest of my life trying to climb out of it. Losing the house was the final, physical severing of my past life. I remember the day I had to be out. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the bare wood floors. This was the house I had been so proud of, the symbol of my success. Now it was just a shell, a hollow monument to my lies. I left with a single suitcase of clothes and a box of personal effects. Everything else was gone, swallowed by the bankruptcy. I was 45 years old, and my net worth was a negative number. I was less than zero. The months that followed are a gray blur of shame and disorientation. I moved into a cheap, furnished room that I rented by the week. It smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. I was adrift. My identity had been so completely wrapped up in being a business owner, a provider, a success, that without those things I didn't know who I was. I was a ghost. My wife filed for divorce. I didn't contest it. What grounds did I have? I had committed the ultimate marital crime, a betrayal of trust so fundamental that there was no coming back from it. Our conversations were stilted, painful affairs, conducted over the phone, always about the logistics of our daughter. Her voice was cold, distant. The warmth, the love, the shared history, it was all gone, erased by my actions. My daughter was the only light in my darkness. Seeing her was both a joy and a torture. I loved her more than life itself, but every time I looked at her, I was reminded of what I had lost for her. I had squandered her future, her college fund, her stable home, all in the service of my own ego. The guilt was a physical weight, a constant pressure on my chest. I had to get a job, any job. My resume was radioactive. The spectacular failure of my business was a matter of public record. After countless rejections, I found work as a night clerk at a budget motel on the outskirts of town. It was a humbling, surreal experience. I would sit behind the plexiglass window from midnight to 8 a.m., checking in weary travelers and dealing with the occasional drunk. In the dead, quiet hours of the night, I had a lot of time to think. I replayed every decision, every lie, every missed opportunity to come clean. I finally understood that the business didn't fail because of the market or the competition. The business failed because I was a coward. I was too afraid to admit I had made a mistake. I was too proud to let go. I chose to sacrifice my family's security rather than face the humiliation of a business failure. It was the worst trade a man could ever make. There is no redemption arc to this story. There is no moment where I suddenly invent a new product and make all the money back. Life isn't like that. The debt is still with me. I live a small, quiet life. My relationship with my daughter is a slow, careful process of rebuilding. I am trying to show her through my actions, not my words, what it means to be an honest, responsible man. It is the hardest work I have ever done. I sometimes drive past the building where my office used to be. There's a yoga studio there now. Life goes on. My ex-wife has remarried. She's happy. She deserved it. The void left by the loss of my savings, of my business, is still there. It's a scar on my soul. It's a constant reminder of the price of pride. I lost every dollar I had ever saved. But the real cost, the one that keeps me awake in the quiet hours of my lonely nights, was the loss of the one thing you can never earn back: the trust of the person you promised to protect. What part of this story spoke to you the most, and why? Tell me in the comments, because your words might inspire or comfort someone who needs to hear them.